Okay, so g'day guys. We're on the line with vocalist Vo from Aussie heavy metal heavyweight Darker Half. How are you, mate? Cheers for speaking with me.
No worries, I'm good. How's things going down there?
Very well, mate. You guys are currently gearing up for a pretty big tour of Europe with Germany's Rage. Are you looking forward to getting over there and getting your music to an even wider audience?
Yeah, well, we're stoked, honestly. Like, this is definitely the biggest thing we've done before, so it's going to be great to see a whole bunch of new countries and play to sort of where metal is a much bigger genre with one of the bands who we're really into with Rage, so it's going to be sick.
Absolutely, and you released your 2014 album Never Surrender over there this year, as well as your brand new EP Classified. Do you have any idea of how the response has been over there?
Yeah, it's going really well, to be honest. Like, obviously, you know, we're on a small German label called Fastball, and it's, you know, the run's selling pretty well and everything. It's getting great responses in terms of reviews and press. And when we were in Eastern Europe in June, the response was really good over there. So, you know, we're really, really happy with how it's been received. And yeah, couldn't really ask for more. The EP as well. Like, the album obviously came out a couple of years ago here, so it was good to give it a second run over there, because, you know, we sold a few copies from Australia, but having people over there actually pushing it and distributing it makes things a lot easier.
Now, you've done a lot of touring over time. Do you have any favourite places that you like to visit?
Well, we haven't really returned anywhere more than once at this point in terms of overseas. But, like, I've really been pretty happy with everywhere we've gone. I like going to Brisbane a lot because I think it's got a really unique scene within Australia in comparison to other cities. Like, you know, I like Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, you know, anywhere really. It's always pretty good. But I think Brisbane has a really sort of close-knit group that I think has probably got the most sort of close-knit scene in the country from what I can see, which I really like. But just going anywhere new is always interesting, and it's always cool going to smaller towns and more rural places and just seeing how shows work in either smaller towns or other countries, just different places.
So as we've already mentioned, you released Classified just a couple of months back, and it's been really well received. Do you feel as though you guys are moving forward, both like as a band and in popularity?
Well, I think that writing is something that develops over time, and like I think, like, not especially any band really. I think if you listen to like our stuff going back to the first album, there's a definite progression on each one in terms of kind of how we think about things and how we put stuff together. And yeah, like, it's a real kind of hard thing to describe. Like, I think Classified's the strongest stuff we've done, and it definitely seems that it's had more consistent. Like, we've had pretty good reactions to most of our stuff, but I think that the reaction's been more consistently positive with this than a lot of other stuff we've done, and it's a good sign when you've got people who've been watching you play for a long time who think it's, you know, good and strong as well, and they know the rest of your stuff really well, as opposed to someone who, you know, might not be aware of anything else and, you know, might like it for what it is, but hasn't got that sort of perspective on knowing what you might have done before. So yeah, I think that we definitely, I feel like it's a really strong release for us, and, you know, you hope the popularity gets bigger and stuff like that, and I think that, yeah, it has, and I think that's got to do with us having, you know, kind of developed over time into being a much more sort of professional unit. Like, I first started this band when I was 15 years old, and we started playing gigs when I was about 16, 17. So it's definitely, you know, we've been doing it a while now, and we kind of know what works and what doesn't a lot better, and can kind of tailor what we do to fit. Well, not to fit, but I think we just do what we do a lot better than we used to from having been doing it for a while. And, you know, you kind of hope that was the case too.
Now you mentioned that your approach to writing has changed. Can you tell us a little bit about the writing process of this EP?
Well, we used a lot more of the studio for this EP. It was the first recording that we did where we actually did all the tracking and recording and production ourselves in our home studio. So it was just having like essentially we didn't have access to the same amount of equipment as we've had on the last couple of albums, but because we were doing it in a home studio environment, we didn't have as much of a like we did the whole thing very quickly, but we didn't have the same time pressure in the sense that every time something goes wrong or you make a mistake or something like that, you don't feel like money's being spent on an hourly rate that's just going by. So we kind of had a bit more opportunity to, instead of just get the songs kind of recorded as quickly as possible and then make it sound good later, we could do a lot more trying to get the right sounds from the beginning going in. And we could do a lot more with the sort of like extra studio sound, like synthesizers and just sound effects and all that sort of stuff. We could actually play around with that stuff a lot more and feel like give it a lot more thought, as opposed to kind of just getting it all into the track as quickly as possible. And I think that just gives you, we still obviously, we had it mixed by Dave Hammer, who did Never Surrender for us as well. So obviously we still were paying for certain things in that regard, but it wasn't the sort of situation where you're sitting there kind of watching the clock and running out of time, and you don't have set days where, we've got this hour to this hour that we can work. So we kind of, there were some days where we did sort of like 16, 18 hours straight, and then other days where we're kind of like, all right, it's not working today, let's just not do it and do it tomorrow. And I think that definitely it's a much better way to work if you've got the luxury of having that sort of stuff. It's definitely a much better way to be able to do it.
Now, us here in Adelaide, we're very excited to hear that you're coming down next February as part of the Church of the Still Heavy Metal Festival. How much of the new material are you going to be including in your set?
At least 2 or 3 songs from the EP. We might end up doing the whole thing at that point. At the moment, we're doing 2 songs pretty much every show, and another one sometimes, kind of depending on how long the set is. And the third one that's kind of sometimes is the deal, which does rely on a lot of sort of extra sound effects and stuff like that to work properly. So it kind of, I like the song a lot, but I feel like it only works in certain situations. So, it pops in and out of the set depending on whether we feel like it's appropriate for that night. Like, because I think it's a good song, but it's definitely got a more sort of progressive element to it than most of our other stuff. So if it seems like a very sort of rock and roll night, rock and roll crowd, it might not be the right sort of thing to do on that sort of a show. So we kind of play it by ear. But we've been doing Aliens Exist and Heaven's Falling, and they've been going down really well live, and we'll probably get the other 2 into the set after this tour with Rage. So, we'll definitely be playing a few of them.
Awesome. So it's a pretty good lineup. We've got Black Majesty and Alarm, yourselves, and Electric Dynamite, I Fear, Mason, and heaps of others, Hidden Intent. Are you looking forward to playing with some of these guys?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Black Majesty and Alarm, we've played with a bunch of times together, and, always, I love those 2 bands, and, get along with the guys really well. I Fear as well is another one we've played with a lot. I don't think we've played with Electric Dynamite, but I've seen them a bunch of times and I really enjoy what they do, so I'm looking forward to that. And Mason as well, we've played with a lot of the bands on the bill we know quite well, and they're all really good guys and great bands, and it's a pleasure to play with pretty much any of them anytime. So we're really stoked to be on. It's a pretty amazing lineup, to be honest, for anywhere. I think that I think it's one of the best gigs that I've seen put together in quite a few years.
They have done an amazing job, especially because it's the debut festival as well. It's being billed as our first and only heavy metal, traditional heavy metal festival. You've played in a ton of shows and festivals all around the place. What do you think separates a successful one from the rest?
I think it's a really hard thing to answer, to be honest. We're playing Steel Assassins in Sydney in about a month, and that's been going really well the last few years. And that's very much a sort of more traditional style heavy metal festival too. But I think that that can sometimes be a really good thing for a festival, and sometimes it can be a bit of a detriment where if you've got too much of the same stuff, it can kind of draw into one another. And I think where Steel Assassins does it really well is that it is predominantly sort of traditional melodic metal, but it still has, Alarm was meant to be one of the headliners this year. They have actually had to pull out, unfortunately, but they're definitely not what you consider a traditional metal band in almost any way, but they'd still fit with the overall feel of the festival. And another one we did earlier with actually 3 of the other guys from Alarm are in this band with Levitation Hex, that we did the Brutality festivals in Sydney and Melbourne. And they were really good too, but they were almost the complete opposite in the sense that it was everything from stoner rock to full-on grind death metal. And it's in Melbourne and Sydney, and they were both really good festivals too. And in Melbourne, at least, that's a unique one because it's actually run at 2 different venues down the road from each other, about 150 metres away. And one ticket gets you entry to both gigs, and the crowd wanders back and forth between the 2. But there was a great crowd at both venues for the entire day, and it's kind of, one venue might be a bit more rock and roll, one might be a bit more heavy metal, but overall you get a bit of a mix of both, regardless of where you're at. And so, I think they're both good examples of festivals that have been around for sort of Steel Assassins, I think 50 year now, and Brutality, I think that was its 3rd or 4th year, and they've both all gone from strength to strength every year. I think the biggest thing that we don't have in Australia, as opposed to Europe, and talking to Rage about this, they were talking about trying to come over, and they mentioned playing sort of the small 3,000, 5,000 person festivals, and we're kind of that doesn't exist here. We've got bar level events, which are great, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking any of these down, I think they're all awesome. But think about Soundwave, which is gone now, but there was no gap between a a festival like Steel Assassins, and then something like Soundwave, where you've got the whole of a whole showground and multiple stages with massive international acts all through it, and there's no middle ground. I think that's something that we really struggle with here, and it's just because we have such a large country that doesn't have very much in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's not even just confined to metal, but I think in Australian music, I think the biggest issue we have here hasn't got anything to do with fans or bands. I think we have some of the best bands in the world, and we have a really strong scene too. But I think the difficulty is that, like, for us to come to Adelaide, it just costs a lot of money. There's no way around it. And if you consider, like, if you use America as an example, it's the equivalent of us living in New York and playing a show in Dallas. It's a long distance to go. And, from an American perspective, they wouldn't think of doing it as a one-off thing without sort of a 30-date tour in the middle of it. And where are you going to do those shows in Australia? Like, it's much harder to put together a long tour through the small towns because they're just so much smaller. And you've kind of got the same thing in Europe.
Well, that's some extremely interesting food for thought right there. Just to finish up, will there be a Darker Half full-length album in 2017?
I would imagine so, yes. We're hoping that when we get back from this tour, we'll be sort of writing and demoing a whole bunch of stuff, and we're hoping to start recording an album at some point next year, depending on what we're doing in terms of the live scene. But yeah, I'd plan to have another album out by the end of next year, for sure.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks very much, Fo, and thank you for being our band of the month. We'll see you in February.
No worries, guys. Have a good one. We can't wait to come down.